Hello, Collective. All right, I'm just going to get into today's message. As always, thank you for joining me. I hope that you take something from this. And yeah. So I think one of the deepest parts of healing is learning how to become emotionally safe for yourself. Because a long time, a lot of people are waiting for safety to come from somewhere outside of themselves, from another person, from reassurance, from being chosen, from being understood, from somebody finally loving them in a way that they've always needed. And I understand that, because when you've been hurt, misunderstood, abandoned, disappointed, or left to carry too much by yourself, of course, parts of you want safety to come from somewhere else. And of course, part of you also wants someone to finally show up and make it all feel easier. But I think there comes a point in healing where something shifts. And the question becomes less about who's going to make me feel safe and more about how do I become safe for myself. And that's a different kind of healing. Because emotional safety is not just whether life is calm. It's not just about whether people around you get everything right. And it's not just about whether nobody ever disappoints you again. It's also about what happens inside of you when life gets hard. Do you abandon yourself? Do you shame yourself for what you feel? Do you talk yourself down out of your own pain? Do you override your own needs? Do you betray your peace just to keep other people comfortable? Or do you make yourself unsafe by refusing to listen when something in you is hurting? And that matters, because sometimes the deepest wound is not just about what the other person did. Sometimes it's the pattern you built afterward of leaving yourself alone in your own pain, or silencing yourself, or minimizing what you feel, or telling yourself you're too sensitive, too emotional, or being extra. Of carrying everything inwardly and then wondering why you feel so tired all the time. And that's not emotional safety. Emotional safety is when your own heart learns, I do not have to be afraid of my own feelings. I do not have to hide from myself. I do not have to earn my own compassion. And I do not have to be perfect to deserve gentleness for myself. And that is powerful. Because a lot of people know how to survive, but they do not know how to stay within themselves tenderly. They know how to keep moving. They know how to shut down. They know how to numb out. They know how to distract themselves. And they know how to perform strength. But staying with yourself honestly and listening to yourself and honoring how you feel without collapsing under it or shaming yourself for it, that is a different skill. And I think that's one of the holiest things a person can learn. To become emotionally safe for yourself means that when pain rises, you do not immediately make yourself the enemy. You do not instantly start judging yourself for still caring. You do not shame yourself for being triggered. You do not tell yourself you should be over it by now. And you do not punish yourself for having a heart. Instead, you begin to meet yourself differently. You say, something is hurting me right now. Something is making me feel overwhelmed. Something in me needs truth, rest, space, comfort, or honesty in this moment. And you listen. And that sounds simple, but it changes everything. Because when you become emotionally safe for yourself, your inner world starts to feel less like a battlefield. You stop fighting away every feeling. You stop turning pain into proof that something is wrong with you. You stop making vulnerability feel like failure. And you stop needing to run from every uncomfortable emotion the second it shows up. You start learning how to stay. Staying present, honest, being kind towards yourself, and staying grounded enough to feel what is true without letting it define your whole identity. That is emotional safety. It is not never feeling hard things. It is knowing that when hard things come up, you are going to leave yourself there alone. That matters so much because a lot of people have experienced what it feels like to be emotionally unsafe with others, to feel dismissed, misread, punished for honesty, ignored in pain, and handled without care. And what can happen after that is enough that you start feeling the same thing about yourself. You dismiss your own intuition, you ignore your own exhaustion, you talk over your own sadness, you shame your own needs, and you act like your pain is only an inconvenience. And I think healing asks us to stop doing that, to become a place where truth is allowed, where sadness is allowed, where tenderness is allowed, where fear can be acknowledged without giving it total control, and your inner experience does not have to be polished before it deserves compassion. That is what safety feels like. I think becoming emotionally safe for yourself also means learning how to respond to your feelings without letting them drive you recklessly. And that is important, because emotional safety is not spiraling every time you feel something deeply. It is not obeying every fear, and is not letting every emotion become your identity or your direction. It is making space for your feelings and then staying rooted enough to care for them wisely. That is maturity. To be able to say, yes, I feel this. Yes, this is real and it matters. But I am still here. I am still grounded. I do not have to abandon myself just because I feel overwhelmed. And that is quietly strong. And I think that kind of strength changes the way you move through life. Because when you become emotionally safe for yourself, you stop reaching outside of yourself for constant permission to feel what you feel. You stop needing everybody else to validate what your body already knows. You stop waiting for somebody to explain your own heart back to you. And you stop begging for clarity in places where your spirit has already gone uneasy. You begin to trust that if something hurts, you're allowed to listen. If something feels off, you're allowed to notice. And if something drains you, you're allowed to take that seriously. That is what self-safety does. It creates inner trust. And that trust is life-changing. Because then, even when life is painful, you are not completely lost inside of it. Even when someone disappoints you, you know how to come back to yourself. And when grief rises, you know how to hold yourself more gently. Even when fear shows up, you do not become cruel to yourself just because you were affected. That is emotional safety. It is becoming someone your own heart does not have to hide from. And honestly, that is beautiful. To become softer for yourself, to become a truer place for yourself, a calmer place, and a place where your feelings can land without being attacked, that does not make you weak. It makes you whole. Because I think a lot of suffering comes not only from what we feel, but from how harshly we respond to what we feel. The grief is painful. And then we shame ourselves for grieving. The fear is painful. And then we shame ourselves for being afraid. The longing is painful. But then we shame ourselves for still caring. And suddenly one wound becomes two, two becomes three, and the original pain and the way we treated ourselves inside of it. That is why emotional safety matters so much. Because it interrupts the second wound. It says, I'm not going to make this harder by turning myself against it. I'm not going to punish myself for being human. And I'm not going to become unsafe to myself just because life has been hard. That is sacred. And I think sometimes emotional safety looks very practical. It looks like letting yourself rest when you're overwhelmed. It's not forcing yourself to perform wellness when all you need is quiet. It looks like leaving spaces to keep dysregulating. It's like leaving spaces that keep dysregulating you. And it looks like setting boundaries without hating yourself for having them. It can look like slowing down enough to ask, what do I actually need in this moment? Not what would impress people, not what would keep everybody else comfortable, and not what would help you avoid your feelings. What do you actually need? Sometimes the answer is honesty. Sometimes it's stillness or distance. Sometimes it's just a prayer. Sometimes it's releasing what kept reopening the wound. And sometimes it's simply letting yourself admit that I am not okay right now and I deserve gentleness while I find my way back. That is also emotional safety. And the beautiful thing is, once you begin building that within yourself, your standards start changing. You stop feeling at home in places that mishandle your heart. You stop normalizing what keeps disturbing your peace. And you stop calling emotional instability passion. You stop chasing people who only know how to meet you through confusion. Because once you know what it feels like to be safe with yourself, you become less willing to stay where the safety is constantly being threatened. That is growth. And that is what happens when healing becomes embodied. You stop looking for love in places that require self-abandonment. You stop treating your own pain like something to argue with. And you stop making yourself small just to stay connected to things that cannot hold you well. You begin to honor that truth, and your inner world deserves that care too. Your heart deserves a safer home. And maybe the first safe home is what is meant to know. And maybe the first safe home it is meant to know is within yourself. And that is so powerful. Because it means your healing is not only dependent on who comes into your life next. It means your peace is not only dependent on whether people finally get it right. It means you can start building something real right now in this moment. Something steady, something grounded, something compassionate, and something that tells your nervous system, your heart, and your spirit that you are safe with me. I will listen and I will not shame you. I will not abandon you to pain. I will tell you the truth. I will honor what matters, and I will care for what hurts. And that change is something that everybody deserves. Because once you become emotionally safe for yourself, your whole relationship with life begins to change. You recover differently. You choose differently. You love differently. You walk away sooner from what disturbs your spirit, and you come back faster when hard emotions arise. Not because you never feel pain again, but because pain no longer gets to separate you from yourself. That is the definition of real healing. Not perfect, not polished, but real. So maybe becoming emotionally safe for yourself is not about never feeling hurt again. Maybe it's about becoming someone who knows how to stay within themselves when that hurt comes. Someone who listens, someone who tells the truth, someone who protects peace, and someone who does not make their own heart beg for compassion. Because your feelings are not the enemy. Your tenderness and your humanity are not the enemy. And maybe one of the most powerful things you will ever do is become a place inside yourself where all that you can exists safely. That is not small. That is transformative. Healing changes everything when you stop waiting for safety to come from outside of you and starts becoming a safe place for yourself first. Yeah. It's self-love. That's the answer, Healing is when you start loving yourself. And it takes time, you have to go through those steps. First, you have to recognize what pain is. And then you have to confront that pain and not walk away from it. You have to accept it and integrate it into who you are. And then once you find that, you start finding peace. And when you find peace, you can find self-love. And when you have self-love, you have healing. And when you heal, you start discovering your uniqueness. And we all know what I think about uniqueness, right? It's your superpower. And once you have your superpower, that's when you can change the world. And I hope that I have changed your world in one way or another, in one small little sentence that I've said or something. But if I've done that, I can go to bed happy tonight, knowing that I touched at least one person or hopefully everybody with a little bit of what I've been going through. And, the healing doesn't stop here. It's going to keep going. It's going to keep getting better. because I think everybody deserves a chance to heal. Even if you've been hurt so badly and you've gone to that darkest place, you deserve healing. You deserve to be loved, and you deserve all the happiness and what's best in the world. And I truly believe that. So on that note, I say thank you, as I always do, to my family, my friends, and the situations that have made me who I am, and to myself, to you. All right, guys, have a great night. All right, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.